So I start with a walking A. So I just want you to...
Ja sitten lähdetään tosta polven nostoon niin kuin nähdään. Ja hän kiinnittää huomiota tiettyihin asioihin, jotka tässä meille varmasti selviää.
The two ways you can recover your leg, it's a low recovery, where the knee hardly bends.
Ja siinä palauttamisvaiheessa on tietysti kaksi mekanismia: alhaalta heilautus.
Or a high recovery, where the heel goes straight to the hamstring, and so the leg can attack the ground from the top.
Ja toinen.
Okay.
Tyyllinen harjoite, jota tehdään ympäri maailmaa.
But I also want what Franz Bosch calls an extension reflex. So we have a great reflex where if we stand on a pin or something hot, we get off the leg really quickly.
Eli tämmöinen selkeä nytki ja
switch in the air.
Saksaava liike tuolla ilmassa ja terävämpi alas. Oh, it looks better.
Much better, yeah. Okay. And he learned it very quickly. Switch in the air. Good.
Jalan polkaisu, joka sitten reflektorisesti myös ihan refleksitasolla siis tukee ton toisen jalan aktivointia.
So I like the way he does drills a lot. He's very stiff on his contact and his pelvis is all the way under him so you can see the vertical bounce.
Eli tää menee toisissa lampion alle, mikä on hyvä homma.
Okay, come back, Desmond. When we talk about that reflex, it's either flexion or extension. The long, what's his name, sorry? Janne. Janne's reflex is always to extend. He's always really long on extension. Jasmine is more focused on flexion. So her spine will close a bit in order to aid flexion, and her extension on the ground isn't her focus at the moment. You want that extension to be the focus and the flexion to happen as a result.
Edellinen oli ihan jo parempi, eli tuli terävä alaslyönti, hyvä saksaava liike, mutta kantapää ei mennyt pakaran kautta riittävästi, ja nyt sitten fokus on siinä, saadaanko nämä kaksi yhdistettyä.
Again. Okay. So the pattern's right. Let's walk this way. The pattern's right, but now is the force correct? So the pattern is right, I like it. But now she needs to really emphasize that on ground contact, what is she doing? Is she just touching the ground and going forward? Or is she touching the ground and actually getting a vertical impulse?
No niin, nyt tämä liikemalli on siis ihan terävään jalan maahanlyönti, joka sitten reflektorisesti auttaa tätä toisen jalan saksaavaa pyöräytystä eteenpäin. Higher.
Got more vertical, but she forgot to switch. So you can see switching becomes an issue. When these guys are going at faster and faster speeds, the ability to get off the ground and switch their legs becomes one of their major limiting factors. So if we can't do it here, how can we expect them to do it at 10 meters per second? Okay, it's like a small sprint. Small. So there's two options. When you finish pushing, there's two options to get your leg back ready to run again. What we want to see is the knee and the hip flex at the same time. So what we want to see is a bend at the same time. So what we want to see is a bend. What we don't want to see is the knee to bend first before the hip.
Se mitä ei halua, mutta lantio pysyy samaan aikaan alkuvaiheessa suorana tai samassa asennossa.
Which goes back to my heel to hamstring movement. If you feel heel to hamstring, then the leg, literally as soon as you finish on the ground, the leg will be in front, ready to strike.
Ja tässä on polvi ja lantio, molemmat koltistuu ja jalka on nopeasti edessä.
what interferes with that is how much time it takes for the athlete to produce force on the ground. At slower speeds it's easier, but at faster speeds that starts to be the distinguishing factor between good athletes and great athletes.
Ja lähdetään tuosta triplauksesta, joka laajenee pikkuhiljaa ja sitten päätyy ihan normaaliin pikajuoksuun tuossa vaiheessa.
So I see two different profiles there. I see Jasmine, who can really rip her foot off the ground. That flexion reflex she can do really, really well. But what she maybe doesn't do so well is use that position to produce force. Her hip kind of stays level to the ground. It doesn't really oscillate, and her leg kind of lands with too much flexion in the knee.
No tässä hamstringit ja pakaralihakset, niiden aktivointiin tulisi ehkä kiinnittää huomiota.
So the simple fix for me is to hit the ground harder and to bounce higher.
In the mindset.
Yes, the mindset. She has to feel that at the moment, if her hip feels like it's here, she has to feel like she can run at this position with a higher hip.
Joo, eli ohjeet annettu ja
stop.
Annetaan lisää ohjeita.
You must pick it up straight away. You can't start just because it's small doesn't mean you do this. Yeah. Even from here. Yeah. Yeah.
Kantapää mielessä alusta lähtien.
Okay, good. Keep going up. Good. And go forward more. Good. Keep going up. Keep going up. Keep going up. Interesting with him. He can do the positions nicely, but as soon as he comes into speed, he loses this pickup. When he gets any faster, he has to spend more time on the ground.
Kondiksia nyt sitten
So reactivity, explosivity is driven by the hip and the knee and ankle.
Ja räjähtävyys tuossa suorituksessa.
Ground contacts are more to do with the knee and ankle stiffness, and force production is more to do with the hip. So athletes that are more used to using the ankle and foot, when they are at slower speeds or when the requirement is low, they tend to shut off the hip because they know they can get enough from the ankle. Good, up higher. Good. No, some forward. Keep it up. Keep it up. Keep it up. And forward. Keep it up. Okay, me. Go forward. Go forward. Go forward.
Pelkistetty ohje. Pelkistetty huomiota myös niin kuin alussa hitailla nopeuksilla. Ei kelpaa, sit se meni.
I know it's not good when you leave the ground and your toes are pointing. Yeah? As soon as you leave the ground, toes up, ready for the ground.
Eli jo irrotusvaiheessa tuolla jalassa kontaktissa sitä pitää jo ajatella tietoisesti.
Push up higher. Good. Keep the height. Keep it. Keep it.
Nyt oli korostusta siinä, että lantio pysyisi korkealla.
As fast as you want. Yes. So straight leg scissor drill. For me, it's a great way to strengthen and stiffen the hamstring. It's a great way to work on isometric stiffness ready for the contact. It's also a great way to start to understand the dynamics for the athlete. At smaller speeds, where do they land on the ground? How high do they push the hip? How long do they spend on the ground? How far behind the hip does the ankle go? It's good that he can produce that force. You need to be able to do that in the gym. But now the next step is, can he turn that force into isometric force? Isometric strength, elastic strength. Can he produce the force before he hits the ground? Can he produce the force here? Before, wait, here. Here's where all the work should be happening. So by the time he lands on the ground, he's already off the ground. pre-activation is one of the most important things. There's no point. So they talk about whip from the hip. Yeah. So from that top position, the order of firing is hip, knee, ankle, an extension. But if the hip and the knee produce loads of force, but the ankle is soft, you don't get fast.
Se niinku häviää se. Ja ollaan samalla jäljellä kuin ennenkin, no problem.
If the hip and knee produce loads of force, but the contact is in front, it's also useless because it's a brake. You can't use the whole system stiffness. What differs in acceleration? The major thing that differs is in upright sprinting, we talk about the knee and the hip flexing at the same time. But in acceleration, the hip dominates flexion. The knee flexion is a bit delayed. So rather than the hip and the knee flexing to make a cycle in drive, the knee flexes and the foot stays on the ground like a piston. Difference. Cycle, piston.
No niin, ja siis kiihdytys.
And then the second thing is the shin angle. When the knee is finished in front, the shin angle is similar to the angle.
Ja toinen tyypillinen vartalon suunta tossa, tässä ollaan niin samalla tasolla.
If the shin angle on contact is similar to the body angle, you can push straight away.
Jos nämä kulmat on samanlaiset, silloin kiihtyy parhaalla mahdollisella tavalla.
If the shin angle is not the same as the body angle, you have to wait, then push.
Ja jos jalkapallo on silloin tietysti paljon hitaampaa.
If the leg recovery is low, then when the leg comes through, the shin angle is ready to push straight away.
Ja luonnollinen tukijalka on sitten valmiina työntämään seuraavaa askelta eteenpäin.
If the leg recovery is a cycle, the shin angle is likely to land out in front, so you have to wait before you can push.
Ja jos taas niin kun jalkaa pyörittää,
it's not only inefficient to have a cycle and to land with correct shin angles, it's also a way of preventing injuries. Just as athletes are easily injured in the bottom of a deep squat, or if they spend most of their time rolling the knee forward and medial, the same issues, the same mechanics happen if they have to land and roll before they can push.
Ja. No niin, nyt toimii.
Good. So stop. So what I'm looking for is a full extension from ankle to neck. And if this was running with a sled or just accelerating, you would expect the spine to stay the same even though his arms are working.
Ja tietysti huomio kiinnittyy tässä.
There's also an order, so stand up, sorry. There's also an order, so even though you're in an angle, even though it feels like it could be a quad dominant movement, the hip is still the driver. Those are the key mechanics of what you want to see in acceleration. How many minutes? 2 minutes?